Hello, British English with Maria here. Welcome. So today's topic is about asking questions. The reason why I decided to cover this topic is I think it's extremely important, the art of asking the right questions at the right time in the right way. It's essential and integral to our life, to many, many different aspects of our life. And I was inspired by a story from a business context where a number of stakeholders, people got together and they were trying to come up with the data that they can discover. And the technical people got really excited about what they could create. And then they created this data which never was actually used at all. It just stayed there, hanging there. And the reason was because they never asked the question, what data do you need? We can get this data, but does the business actually need it? And vice versa, the business people never asked the question or really raised the issue of that data maybe wasn't very useful for them, but maybe they didn't ask the question, what else can you get us? Or could you get us something different or in a different format? So that really inspired me to think about why is it important to ask the questions and perhaps the barriers and the reasons why we might not ask the questions at all, and what consequences that might lead to or might not lead to as a result. So I think really, really essential topic here today. So I hope you stay with me until the end. So the reason why it's great to ask questions is because you are building that connection with the person, because you are showing to them, hey, I'm listening to you. I'm interested in what you're saying. Of course, you have to ask the right types of questions, not something generic or something that shows that you haven't been listening or understanding or following at all. So they have to be probing questions, maybe trying to understand things more in depth. And that can really help, if you ask the questions that do the format as I explained, that will just annoy the person, make them feel like you're wasting your time or like you're asking questions just for the sake of it, or perhaps just to show off. And where this might be a barrier is perhaps in cultures where there's a high power distance, meaning that if you are subordinate or if you're a lower status or rank in a society or by age, asking a question to someone superior to you in any shape or form is actually seen as challenging them, questioning their authority. And that can be really tough because you want to show you are interested and perhaps you definitely want to help. By asking the right questions and getting the right information means that you can actually do more for that person and you can be more useful to them, but they might take offense to you asking them the question. So I suppose you have to question which culture are you in, and perhaps the way you ask the question has to really reflect the cultural norms of the society which you are operating in. And it often happens that someone from where there is less high power distance goes to a higher power distance culture, they will be, not afraid to ask questions, but they will run into situations where they offend people, create awkward situations, and vice versa. People from, say, I don't know, for example, Asian culture goes into like America and they will not ask the questions for the fear of sounding like they're challenging someone. And in the USA, they will be seen as someone who's not interested, who's not engaging, who doesn't apply any critical thinking. So that's another thing, right? You have to think about, have you transitioned to a different culture and adapt accordingly? And actually, that's another great point about asking questions is the critical thinking part, right? Because it shows that you try to understand things more in depth. And when you're asking questions, you are analyzing the information better. You're trying to evaluate, you're trying to reflect on what it is that you are trying to interpret, and that can be really, really useful because you can come to more meaningful conclusions and more powerful evaluations, which can in turn lead to better decision making or just some better actions can be taken. Of course, if you're an English learner, you must be thinking, well, what about the language barrier? Yes, that can really make it difficult to ask the questions. And there are different reasons for that. It's not just the vocabulary, right? So when I'm with my students, sometimes they lack the vocabulary to ask the right questions. Sometimes they lack the grammar, as you might know about indirect questions. So instead of saying, what is the answer? Can you tell me what the answer is? Do you know what the answer is? Can really transform going from direct and perhaps even rude to indirect, being more polite, softening the tone. And again, with the tone, right? So the grammar can help, but also the actual intonation and tone are very important when speaking the English language. Especially with native speakers or someone who's fluent, because they might interpret your tone as aggressive or rude if you don't use the right intonation, depending how much experience, of course, they have working with other cultures. So my advice to you as an English learner, don't be afraid to ask the questions, because at the end of the day, it's better to ask them than not to. But you can master the art of asking the questions by improving your vocabulary, improving your grammar, and also working on your intonation. Those three things will really help you. So it might be great to ask questions to learn more about the subject, as I mentioned a couple of times previously, more in depth. However, if you have absolutely no idea about the subject, and sometimes you listen to someone about an unfamiliar topic for the very first time and go, do you have any questions? And you're thinking, am I an idiot that I don't have any questions? I'm just still trying to process what you've told me, because that's completely new information for me. And I need time to go away and think about it. But can you really say that? And I mean, sometimes you're not even sure why you don't have a question. That can be really tough, right? So perhaps a bit of a word of advice. If you're presenting new information, if you see that your audience is perplexed or still trying to process the information, give them time to digest. Break it down for them in a way that they can digest things better and quicker. If you have a chance, perhaps give them an opportunity to walk away, to maybe do some more research and to come back to you with questions afterwards. Maybe next time you meet or something like that, or maybe via an email or a message, because sometimes people need more time, and recognizing that can really empower people to connect with you better, and to keep that dialogue open and going. So that can be really, really, really important. Of course, sometimes people avoid asking the questions because they are afraid of slowing down the other person or whatever is happening, breaking up the flow, and just basically they don't want to waste other people's time. In fact, as I mentioned in my very first example, in that business scenario, perhaps they would have spent more time asking the questions and analyzing, and it might have felt like, oh my God, I just want to get on with this project. It's so exciting. I want to work with the data. However, they wasted that valuable time. Had they asked the questions to begin with, the right questions, had they invested more time in those questions, they would have saved time down the line by only investing in projects that would have been more valuable to the business. So sometimes what feels like a waste of time in that moment can actually save you a ton of time down the line. Of course, we are humans. We are afraid of being judged. That's really normal. So you are afraid of appearing ignorant. However, the worst thing you can do is to try to appear intelligent and smart, not to ask the question. And the great leaders, the great managers, they often say there is no such thing as a stupid or irrelevant question. Sometimes asking basic question can help people to get back to basics, can help refocus the presentation, can help the person presenting understand at what level of understanding their audience is. So it might seem basic to you, but someone else might be thinking, if it's more than one person listening to a presentation, for example, or I don't know, just listen to a person telling a story, they might think that everyone else understands, whereas everyone else might be asking the very same question. So you could be helping yourself, you could be helping the person telling the story or the information, and you can be helping other people listening to that information as well. So I think you have to get over that fear of judgment and think about, perhaps one way of doing it is thinking about other people. is thinking about the fact that, what is more important, to appear intelligent or to actually get to the bottom of the whatever the issue is, and to help you make better connections, better decisions down the line once again. Some people are just shy, of course, and you have to push yourself to get over that shyness. And I think, again, when you focus less on your ego and how you are perceived, but rather on the fact of why you're asking the questions, what are you trying to get out by asking that question, that can help you shift the focus from yourself to the task, to the reason, to the objective as to why you're asking the question. And I think that can be really, really helpful. And if you're someone who's not very perhaps articulate and maybe struggles sometimes to formulate the questions or to formulate some ideas, listen to people who do that. Read more, maybe practice in your private time asking questions. Think ahead about who you're going to be talking to, what presentation you're listening to. Maybe think about something that interests you and try to formulate it a little bit in your head beforehand. Even if you mess it up, and I do this with my lessons, right? With my students, I go beforehand, think about what you want to say, talk during the lesson, get my feedback after the lesson. Once again, recreate that conversation and try to correct the mistakes. And you can do the same here, right? Even if you mess up the question after the meeting or after the interaction, just go away and think about how you could have said that question, but make sure you do it out loud, because in your head, things can sound fantastic. When you say it out loud, that can be a completely different story. So just practicing saying things out loud can be super, super helpful. Trust me. I do it with my French lessons, and it's of immense value when I'm improving my spoken language and confidence and ability to sound more fluid. And once again, back to why the objective of asking the questions. You can understand better, you can communicate, build relationships, critical thinking. We talked about that. You can try to avoid misunderstandings and avoid wasting precious time down the line. It can also be very helpful to foster creativity. So you're fostering creativity because when you're asking more questions, you're opening up different possibilities. You're looking at things from different angles. And again, that can be of immense value. And finally, when you are in a maybe conflictive situation, when you have a disagreement, by asking further questions, you can try to understand the other person's point of view, and you can try to show what it is that you feel on the subject. And again, that can help resolve the conflict and foster better relationship and come to an agreement and some sort of mutual understanding. So I hope you found today's podcast episode helpful. It certainly is to me. As I was talking through it, I was reflecting on what I do, how I do things, and of course, I hope to make things better and better in the future. There is no such thing as a perfect question or the perfect way of asking a question. You can only do your best and try to improve. So I hope you go away with some food for thought and you will try to implement it in your life in different areas of your life. Thank you for tuning in and listening to British English with Maria.